The sky above New Montana burned orange and red as Valkyrie dropships descended through the clouds like angry metal birds. And Sergeant Daniel Harper knew that death had come to this peaceful colony world once again. He pressed his back against the crumbling wall of the medical facility and checked his rifle. For the third time in 2 minutes, his hands steady despite the chaos erupting all around him. Because a combat medic could not afford to let fear control his movements. "Harper, we need to move now," Lieutenant Amy Porter shouted from across the corridor, her voice cutting through the sounds of explosions and screaming civilians. But Harper could see the wounded colonists, still huddled in the basement below. Families with children who could not run fast enough to reach the evacuation shuttles. And he knew he could not leave them behind. The Valkyrie were unlike any enemy humanity had ever faced. And Harper had learned this truth the hard way 3 years ago when they killed his younger brother during a raid on a mining station near the outer rim. These alien warriors stood nearly 7 feet tall with gray armored skin and 4 arms that could tear a human apart with ease. But the most terrifying thing about them was their eyes. Every Valkyrie warrior had eyes that glowed with a strange golden light. And when that light burned bright, they felt no pain and showed no mercy and fought until their bodies simply stopped working. "I am not leaving these people," Harper yelled back to Porter as he moved toward the basement stairs. Corporal Kevin Brooks appeared at his side with his heavy pulse, cannon ready, his young face grim but determined. "Then we hold here until they reach the shuttles," Brooks said. And Harper nodded his thanks to the young soldier, who had every reason to want revenge against the Valkyrie but still chose to protect the innocent first. The first wave of Valkyrie warriors crashed through the front entrance of the medical facility like a living avalanche of muscle and rage, their golden eyes blazing with that unnatural light that Harper had seen in his nightmares for years. Porter opened fire from her position and dropped 2 of them with precise shots to their heads. But the others kept coming, even as bullets tore through their gray flesh. One warrior took 6 rounds to the chest and still managed to cross half the room before finally collapsing. And Harper watched in horror as the golden glow in its eyes flickered 3 times before going dark. "What keeps them fighting like that?" Brooks shouted as he unleashed a burst from his cannon that cut down 3 more attackers. Harper had wondered the same thing many times. Because no creature should be able to ignore wounds that would kill any human instantly. And no soldier should be able to fight without any trace of fear or hesitation. The battle raged for what felt like hours, but was probably only 20 minutes. And when the Valkyrie finally pulled back to regroup, Harper counted the cost of holding the medical facility. 4 human soldiers dead and 9 wounded. But the civilians had made it to the evacuation shuttles. "And that was all that mattered right now. We need to go," Porter said, her voice tired but still commanding as she directed the remaining squad members toward the rear exit. But Harper noticed something strange near the front entrance where the Valkyrie bodies lay in twisted piles. One of them was still alive. The young warrior could not have been more than 18 years old by human standards, and the golden glow in his eyes was flickering weakly like a candle about to go out. Harper approached with his rifle raised, ready to end the threat. But then something unexpected happened. The golden light faded completely from the young warrior's eyes. And when he looked up at Harper, his expression was not rage or hatred, but confusion and fear. "Where am I?" the Valkyrie asked in broken human speech. And his voice sounded different from any Valkyrie Harper had ever heard, softer and filled with emotion. "What did you say?" Harper asked, keeping his weapon aimed at the alien's head. "I do not understand what is happening to me," the young warrior said, and tears began to fall from his now normal gray eyes. "I feel strange things inside my chest, and I do not know why." Harper had captured Valkyrie prisoners before, and they always acted the same way, spitting curses and struggling until they died from their wounds or were executed. But this one was different. This one seemed almost human. Porter, I need to take this one alive, Harper called out. And his lieutenant looked at him like he had lost his mind. Are you crazy? She asked, but she could see the same thing Harper could see. That this Valkyrie was not acting like the others at all. They bound the young warrior and carried him to the evacuation shuttle. Ignoring the protests from the other soldiers who wanted to kill him on the spot. 3 days later, on board the medical ship Horizon, the Lisa Chun made a discovery that changed everything humanity knew about their enemy, Sergeant Harper. You need to see this, she said, her voice shaking as she pointed to the brain scans displayed on her monitor. Harper looked at the images and felt his stomach turn, because wrapped around the young Valkyrie's brainstem was something that should not exist, a parasite. It is dying, Chun explained, her fingers tracing the outline of the creature on the screen. When we separated him from his people, it stopped receiving something it needs to survive. And now it is releasing its hold on his neural pathways. What does that mean? Harper asked. It means everything we thought we knew about the Valkyrie is wrong, Chun said. These parasites are not natural. Someone created them long ago as weapons. And they have been controlling the Valkyrie ever since. She pulled up more data on her screen and showed Harper the chemical analysis of the parasite's secretions. It floods their brains with aggression hormones, while suppressing the regions responsible for empathy, love, and independent thought, she said. Without these creatures, the Valkyrie would be a completely different species. Harper looked through the observation window at the young warrior sleeping peacefully in his medical bed. And for the first time since his brother's death, he felt something other than hatred for the enemy. He felt pity. They never had a choice, Harper whispered. They have been slaves their entire lives, and they do not even know it. Chun nodded slowly and placed her hand on Harper's shoulder. But now we know the truth, she said. And maybe, just maybe, we can find a way to set them free. In his bed, the young Valkyrie named Thulrik opened his eyes and looked at the ceiling of the hewn ship. And for the first time in his life, he wondered what it meant to be truly alive. 3 weeks passed since the raid on New Montana, and the young Valkyrie prisoner named Thulrik had become something that no one expected. He had become proof that monsters could become peopled. The Elisa. Chun stood before the gathered military commanders in the briefing room of Station Pinnacle. Her presentation displayed on the massive screen behind her, and every face in the room showed a mixture of shock and disbelief. The parasites are not natural organisms, Chun explained, pointing to the detailed scans of Valkyrie brain tissue. They were engineered thousands of years ago by a species we have not yet identified. Possibly one that was conquered by the early Valkyrie or one that wanted to use them as weapons. Admiral Patricia Cole leaned forward in her chair, her gray eyes sharp and focused. Are you telling me that every Valkyrie warrior we have fought for the past 50 years has been mind-controlled? She asked. Not controlled exactly, Chun replied. More like modified. The parasites do not give commands, but they change who the host fundamentally is, by suppressing certain brain functions and enhancing others. She brought up a comparison chart showing Valkyrie brain activity with and without the parasites. With the parasite active, a Valkyrie cannot feel compassion, cannot experience love, cannot question orders or consider the morality of their actions, Chun said. They become perfect soldiers, fearless and remorseless, but they lose everything that makes a person a person. Sergeant Harper sat in the back of the room listening to every word, and his thoughts kept returning to his brother's final moments. He had spent 3 years hating the Valkyrie with every fiber of his being, but now he was learning that they might be the greatest victims in this entire war. What happens when the parasites are removed? Admiral Cole asked. Chun smiled slightly and gestured toward the door. Perhaps you should ask him yourself. She said. The door opened, and Thalric walked into the briefing room, escorted by 2 guards, but not bound or restrained in any way. Commanders tensed at the sight of a Velthari warrior standing among them. But Thalric showed no aggression, only a nervous uncertainty that seemed completely foreign on his alien features. "I remember everything I did," Thalric said, his voice quiet and filled with shame. "I remember the humans I killed on the colony worlds and the children I watched die without feeling anything at all." He paused and looked down at his 4 hands. "Now, I feel it all," he continued. "Every death weighs on my heart like a stone. And I understand for the first time why humans fought so hard against us, because you were not fighting warriors. You were fighting monsters wearing the bodies of people who never asked to become monsters." Admiral Cole studied the young Velthari for a long moment before speaking. "How do we know this is not a trick?" she asked. "How do we know you will not return to your people and become our enemy again?" "I cannot return to my people," Thalric replied. "The moment they see that my eyes no longer glow with the light of the blessed, they will know that I have been corrupted, and they will kill me as a traitor to our ancestors." Harper stood up from his seat and walked toward Thalric. "The blessed is what you call the parasites?" He asked. Thalric nodded slowly. "We are taught from birth that the blessed are gifts from our ancestors, sacred creatures that make us strong enough to conquer the galaxy," he explained. "Every Velthari child receives their blessed at the age of 5. And after that day, they never feel fear or doubt or love ever again. But you felt something even before the parasite died," Harper said, remembering the tears in Thalric's eyes when they first captured him. "Sometimes I had dreams," Thalric admitted. "Strange dreams where I felt things I could not name. And when I woke, I always thought there was something wrong with me, that I was defective." Dr. Chun stepped forward with a small device in her hand. "This is what we have been working on," she said, showing the commanders a modified pulse rifle attachment, a targeted sonic frequency that can kill the parasites without harming the host. She explained how the frequency disrupted the parasites' neural connections and caused them to die within seconds, releasing their hold on the Velthari brain. "The host experiences confusion and emotional overload initially," Chun said. "But within hours, they begin to stabilize. And within days, they become essentially a new person, one who can think and feel for themselves." Admiral Cole stood up and walked to the window overlooking the stars. "You are proposing that we stop killing the Velthari," she said, "and start liberating them instead." "I am proposing that we give them a choice," Chun replied. "Something they have never had in 10,000 years of history." The room fell silent as everyone considered the implications of this plan. Lieutenant Porter, who had accompanied Harper to the briefing, finally spoke up. "What about the Velthari who do not want to be freed?" she asked. "The ones who believe the parasites are sacred, will they just accept losing their blessed?" Chung shook her head. "No, they will fight us harder than ever," she admitted. "To them, we will not be liberators, but violators, heretics who are stealing their souls." Harper thought about this and understood the terrible irony of what they were planning. They would have to hurt the Velthari to save them. They would have to violate their deepest beliefs to give them the freedom to form their own beliefs. But what was the alternative? To keep killing an entire species that never had a chance to choose who they wanted to be? "I am in," Harper said, and everyone turned to look at him. "My brother died fighting the Velthari, and I thought I would hate them forever. But now I know the truth." He looked at Thalric and saw not an enemy, but a victim. "They murdered my brother while something else controlled their hands," Harper continued. "And if I can help stop that from happening to anyone else, human or Velthari, then that is what I am going to do." Admiral Cole nodded slowly and turned back to face the room. "Very well," she said. "We will begin field testing the liberation weapons immediately. And may whatever God exists forgive us if we are wrong. That night, Harper sat with Thalric in the medical bay and told him about his brother, about the man he was and the dreams he had for the future. And Thalric listened and mourned for a human he had never met, because for the first time in his life, intelligence reports arrived the next morning with news that chilled everyone who read theme. A massive Veltari assault was incoming, led by the most feared warrior in their empire. War Commander Kethril himself was coming, and he would show no mercy. Ember Ridge rose from the dusty plains of Kepler 7, like the spine of some ancient buried giant. And Sergeant Daniel Harper dug his trench deeper as the sun began to rise over the eastern mountains. Today would be the day that everything changed. Human forces had fortified the ridge 3 days ago, knowing that the Veltari would have to pass through this narrow valley to reach the civilian settlements beyond. And every soldier understood that retreat was not an option. Lieutenant Porter moved along the defensive line, checking on her troops, her face calm, but her eyes betraying the fear that everyone felt. "They will hit us at dawn," she told Harper as she knelt beside his position. "Intelligence says Kethril never attacks in darkness because he wants his enemies to see death coming." Harper checked the new attachment on his rifle, the sonic pulse emitter that Dr. Chun had designed, and wondered if it would really work in the chaos of battle. "How many of them are coming?" Corporal Brooks asked from his heavy weapons nest 10 meters to the left. "At least 5,000, Porter replied. "Maybe more." The human defenders numbered only 800. But they held the high ground, and they had weapons that the Veltari had never seen before. As the first rays of sunlight touched the valley floor, a sound began to rise from the distant tree line. A rhythmic chanting that grew louder and louder until it shook the very air. Then the Veltari emerged from the forest, like a gray tide of death. Thousands of warriors marching in perfect formation with their golden eyes blazing beneath the morning sun. At their head rode War Commander Kethril on a massive armored beast, his forearms raised high as he led his people toward the human lines. Harper had read the intelligence files on Kethril and knew that this warrior had conquered 17 worlds and killed more humans than any other Veltari commander in history. He was a legend among his people and a nightmare among humanity. "Hold your fire until they reach the markers," Porter shouted through the communication channel. And Harper watched the advancing army draw closer and closer. When the first wave of Veltari crossed the range markers, the human lines erupted with thunder and lightning. Plasma bolts and kinetic rounds tore through the charging warriors, dropping dozens with every second. But the Veltari did not slow down or seek cover. They ran straight into the wall of fire with no fear in their glowing eyes, climbing over the bodies of their fallen comrades to reach the human positions. Harper fired his standard rifle until it overheated, then switched to the sonic pulse emitter and targeted a warrior who was nearly upon him. The pulse hit the Veltari square in the chest, and the warrior screamed a sound unlike anything Harper had ever heard. A scream not of pain but of loss. The golden glow vanished from the warrior's eyes, and he collapsed to his knees, clutching his head. When he looked up again, he was weeping. "What have you done to me?" The freed Veltari gasped, staring at his own hands as if seeing them for the first time. "I set you free," Harper replied, then ducked as another warrior leaped over the trench. More humans began using the sonic weapons with similar results across the battlefield. Veltari warriors would charge forward with murderous intent, get hit by the pulse, and then stop fighting entirely as the parasites died inside them. Some fell to the ground crying. Others simply sat down in confusion, and a few began running away from the battle as fast as they could. But plenty of Veltari remained untouched by the sonic weapons, and they kept coming with relentless fury. Brooks took a spear through his shoulder, but kept firing his heavy cannon, gritting his teeth against the pain as he cut down wave after wave of attackers. Porter led a countercharge to reinforce a section of the line that had nearly collapsed, fighting hand-to-hand with warriors twice her size. and through it all, Harper kept watching for Kethril, knowing that the war commander would eventually come for him. The moment came 2 hours into the battle. Rahl had noticed what the human weapons were doing to his warriors, and his golden eyes burned brighter than ever as he charged directly toward the section of line where the pulse weapons were concentrated, cut through human soldiers like a scythe through wheat. His forearms wielding blades that moved too fast for the eye to follow. Harper saw him coming and raised his sonic emitter. But Kethril was faster. The war commander knocked the weapon from Harper's hands and lifted him by the throat, bringing them face to face. "What sorcery is this?" Kethril demanded, his voice deep and terrible. "What have you done to my warriors?" Harper struggled to breathe, but managed to gasp out a response. "We killed your parasites. We freed them from slavery." Kethril's golden eyes flickered with something that might have been confusion. "The blessed are sacred," he said. "They are the gift of our ancestors. You cannot take them from us." Porter appeared behind Kethril and drove her combat knife into his back, causing the war commander to roar in pain and drop Harper to the ground. Harper scrambled for his sonic emitter as Kethril turned to face Porter. But the lieutenant was already wounded and falling back. The emitter was in Harper's hands now, and he pressed it against Kethril's chest before the warrior could react. In that moment, Kethril understood what was about to happen. He had seen his warriors lose the light in their eyes, had watched them crumble into weeping wrecks, and now he felt the human weapon pressed against his own body. "No, please!" Kethril cried out, and his voice cracked with something that sounded almost like terror. "Leave them in. I beg you. Do not take my blessed. Do not make me like them." Harper hesitated, his finger on the trigger, looking into the desperate golden eyes of his greatest enemy. This warrior had killed thousands of humans, had destroyed entire colonies, had taken Harper's brother from him forever, but he had never chosen to do any of it. "I am sorry," Harper whispered, "but you deserve to know who you really are." He pulled the trigger. Kethril, a scream echoed across the battlefield, a sound of anguish so profound that even the fighting seemed to pause for a moment. The war commander collapsed to his knees as the golden light faded from his eyes, replaced by something raw and broken and terribly, beautifully alive. And when he looked up at Harper again, he was no longer a monster. He was just a person, seeing the world clearly for the first time in 50 years. The tears that fell from his gray eyes were the first tears he had ever cried. War Commander Kethril had conquered 17 worlds and led armies of thousands into battle without ever feeling the weight of a single death. But now every life he had taken pressed down upon his soul like mountains of stone. He knelt in the blood-soaked dirt of Ember Ridge and wept like a child as 50 years of suppressed emotions crashed through his mind in an endless wave. Harper stood over him with the sonic emitter still in his hands, watching the most feared warrior in the Velthari Empire fall apart before his eyes. The battle around them had not stopped, but it had changed. Freed Velthari wandered the battlefield in confusion while their still parasited comrades fought on with desperate fury, and human soldiers struggled to tell friend from foe in the chaos. "What have you done to me?" Kethril gasped between sobs, his forearms wrapped around his chest as if trying to hold himself together. "I showed you the truth," Harper replied, kneeling down to meet the broken warrior's eyes. "The parasites were never a blessing. They were chains. And now you are free." Kethril shook his head violently. "Free?" he repeated, and a horrible laugh escaped his throat. "I remember everything. I remember every human I killed, every child who screamed as I burned their homes, every plea for mercy that I ignored because I could not feel why mercy mattered." He looked at his own hands, the same hands that had taken so many lives. "How can this be freedom when all I feel is pain?" Harper had no easy answer for that question, so he offered the only thing he could. He offered water. The simple gesture seemed to shock Kethral more than the sonic pulse said, "Why would you help me?" The Valkyrie asked, staring at the canteen as if it might be a weapon. "After everything my people have done to yours, why would you show me kindness?" "Because someone showed me kindness once when I did not deserve it," Harper said. "And because killing you would not bring back anyone you killed. It would just add one more death to a war that has too many already." Kethral took the water and drank, his hands trembling so badly that half of it spilled down his chest as he drank. Memories flooded through his newly awakened mind. Memories he had never been able to process before he remembered his daughter, Vela, a bright young warrior who had died 5 years ago during a human counterattack on a mining colony. At the time, Kethral had felt nothing but a cold recognition that an asset had been lost. But now the grief hit him like a physical blow. "My daughter," he whispered, fresh tears streaming down his gray face. "I never mourned her. I never even understood what mourning meant." He clutched his chest where his heart beat beneath the armored skin. "She was my child, and I felt nothing when she died." What kind of father feels nothing? "A father who was not allowed to feel," Harper said quietly. "That was not your fault." Kethral. The use of his name made the Valkyrie look up sharply. "You know who I am?" he asked. "Everyone knows who you are," Harper admitted. "You are the war commander who destroyed the colony on New Horizon. The one who burned the cities of Kepler 3. The one who—" "Stop," Kethral begged, covering his ears. "Please stop. I cannot bear to hear more." But Harper had one more thing to say. "You are also the one who killed my brother 3 years ago." On a mining station near the outer rim, Kethral went very still. "I do not remember individual kills," he said slowly. "There were so many, I never thought of them as people. Only as obstacles." "His name was Lucas Harper," the sergeant said, and his voice remained steady even as old pain flickered in his eyes. "He was 22 years old, and he wanted to be a teacher. He used to say that the colonies needed more schools and fewer soldiers." Kethral listened to these words and felt something crack open inside his chest. "I am sorry," he said, and the words felt strange on his tongue, foreign and inadequate. "I know that means nothing. I know sorry cannot give him back to you, but I am sorry." Harper nodded slowly. "It means more than you know," he replied, "because a Valkyrie has never apologized before. Never in 50 years of war has one of your kind said those words to us." The sound of weapons fire drew their attention back to the battle lieutenant. Porter was leading a desperate defense against a new wave of Valkyrie attackers. And the human lines were beginning to buckle. "They will not stop," Kethral said, watching his former soldiers charge without fear into human guns. "As long as the blessed control them, they will keep fighting until every last one is dead." He turned to Harper with a strange new fire in his gray eyes. "Unless someone tells them the truth," Kethral rose to his feet, his massive body still trembling from emotional overload but standing tall nonetheless. "Give me one of your weapons," he said, "the sonic ones. Give me one, and let me stand with you." Harper hesitated. "You were ready to kill me 5 minutes ago." He pointed out, 5 minutes ago, I was not me," Kethral replied. "Now I am, and I choose to fight for the ones who gave me back my soul." Before Harper could respond, a new force appeared at the edge of the battlefield. Sub-Commander Venus had arrived with reinforcements. 500 fresh warriors with blazing golden eyes and weapons. Raised for slaughter, Venus had been Kethral's second in command for 20 years. Fiercely loyal and utterly devoted to the ways of her people, when she saw Kethral standing beside a human soldier, his eyes dark and tears still wet on his face, her expression twisted with horror and rage. "War Commander!" she shouted across the bloody ground. "What have they done to you?" Kethral stepped forward to face the warriors who had once followed him without question. "They have freed me." "Venus," he called back. "The blessed are not gifts, they are prisons." and I am asking you to let us free you too." Venus's response was a roar of fury. "You are corrupted," she screamed. "You are no longer Cathrol. You are a puppet wearing his body." She raised her blade and pointed it at her former commander. "Warriors of the true path, your orders are clear. Kill the corrupted ones and destroy the humans who defiled them." The fresh Velthari troops began to advance, and Cathrol knew that his choice had been made. Harper pressed a sonic emitter into the former war commander's hands. "Are you sure about this?" Harper asked it. Cathrol looked at the weapon that had destroyed everything he thought he was. And then he looked at the warriors charging toward them with murder in their golden eyes. "I have never been sure of anything in my entire life," he said. Until right now, he raised the weapon and stood shoulder to shoulder with the human who had freed him. "Then I die free," Cathrol declared. And together they turned to face the coming storm. The final battle of Ember Ridge would be remembered for generations as the moment when everything changed. When former enemies stood together against a common darkness and chose freedom over far, Cathrol raised the sonic emitter and faced the warriors who had once been his loyal soldiers. His heart's pounding with emotions he was still learning to understand. Beside him stood Sergeant Daniel Harper and the remnants of the human defensive line, exhausted and bloody but refusing to break behind them. Dozens of freed Velthari huddled in confusion, some weeping, some staring at the sky as if seeing it for the first time, and others slowly rising to their feet with something new burning in their gray eyes. "Forward!" Sub-Commander Venus screamed, and her 500 warriors charged across the broken ground with weapons raised and golden light blazing. Darren Lisa Chun's voice crackled through Harper's communicator. "Sergeant, I have modified the mobile broadcast unit to emit the sonic frequency across a wider area," she said. "If you can protect the vehicle for 3 minutes, I can liberate every Velthari on this battlefield." Harper looked at the armored transport sitting 50 meters behind the lines and knew that 3 minutes might as well be 3 hours with 500 enemies bearing down on them. "Do it," he ordered. "We will hold them." Porter rallied the remaining human soldiers into a tight defensive formation, while Cathrol gathered the freed Velthari who were willing to fight. "Listen to me," the former war commander shouted to his newly awakened brethren. "I know you are confused. I know you are afraid. I know you feel pain that you never imagined possible." He pointed at the charging warriors with their golden eyes. "But those are our brothers and sisters trapped in the same prison we just escaped. And if we do not fight now, they will die as slaves." One by one, the freed Velthari began to pick up fallen weapons, their hands shaking but their eyes clear. A warrior named Talvek stepped forward and stood beside Cathrol. "I remember my children," Talvek said quietly. "I have 3 children, and I never loved them until this moment. I will fight so they can know what love feels like." Others joined him, forming a ragged line of gray-skinned warriors who had never before chosen their own path when Venus's forces crashed into their position. They met not a broken enemy but a united front of humans and Velthari fighting side by side. Cathrol fought with skill and precision, but for the first time he fought with restraint, aiming his sonic emitter rather than killing blows. Whenever possible, each warrior he freed was one more soldier for their cause. One more soul rescued from bondage. Harper covered his flank, dropping enemies who got too close while calling out warnings and coordinates to the other defenders. 1 minute. Chun announced through the communicator. Venus herself carved a path through the defenders, her 4 blades spinning in deadly arcs as she sought her corrupted commander, Cathrol. She roared, "Face me, traitor!" Cathrol turned to meet her, and for a moment he saw the warrior he had fought beside for 20 years, the loyal second who had never questioned his orders. And he felt grief for the person she could have been, Venus. "Please listen to me," he said. "You do not have to be this. The rage you feel is not yours. It belongs to the parasites. The blessed are the soul of our people." Venus screamed, attacking with furious speed. "Without them, we are nothing." Catherall blocked and dodged her strikes, refusing to counterattack. "We are everything," he replied. "We are feeling, thinking beings who were robbed of our choices before we could even understand what choice meant." Venus pressed her assault, driving Catherall back step by step. "I have served the blessed my entire life," she snarled. "I have killed thousands in their name. I have sacrificed everything for the glory of our ancestors." "And how much of that was really you?" Catherall asked, catching her blade with his bare hand, gray blood dripping from the wound. "How much was the creature wrapped around your brain?" For just a moment, something flickered in Venus's golden eyes. A shadow of doubt that the parasites could not fully suppress. "I have dreams sometimes," she whispered, so quietly that only Catherall could hear. "Strange dreams where I feel things I cannot name." "I had them too," Catherall said gently. "They were pieces of yourself trying to break free." 30 seconds. Chun called out. Venus shook her head violently, and the golden light in her eyes blazed brighter than ever. "No," she screamed. "I will not be corrupted. I will not betray my ancestors. I would rather die." She lunged forward with killing intent, and Catherall knew he could not dodge in time, but he could act. He stepped into her attack and wrapped his arms around her, holding her close as his sonic emitter pressed against her spine. "Then forgive me, old friend," he said, and pulled the trigger. Venus screamed as the parasites died inside her, a sound of loss and transformation that cut through the chaos of battle. And then Chun's broadcast reached full power. A wave of sonic energy swept across the battlefield like an invisible tide. And everywhere it touched, golden eyes went dark. Hundreds of Velthari warriors collapsed simultaneously, clutching their heads as 50 years of suppressed emotions came flooding back. The battle ended not with a final charge, but with silence, broken only by the sound of weeping. Harper lowered his weapon and looked out at a field of former enemies sitting in the dirt, crying for the first time in their lives. Some called out names of loved ones they had never truly known. Others screamed in horror at memories of what their hands had done, and a few simply sat in stunned silence. Overwhelmed by sensations, they had no words for. Venus lay in Catherall's arms, her golden eyes now gray and filled with tears. "What have I done?" she whispered. "My entire life, everything I believed. It was all a lie." "No," Catherall said softly. "Your loyalty was real. Your courage was real. Only your chains were lies." He helped her to her feet and turned to face the humans who had given them this terrible, wonderful gift. Harper walked toward him across the blood-soaked ground, and the two warriors who had been mortal enemies just hours ago stood face to face. "What happens now?" Harper asked. Catherall looked at the freed Velthari scattered across the battlefield, thousands of his people experiencing true consciousness for the first time. "Now I go home," he said. "Not as a war commander, but as a witness. And I tell everyone what happened here." He picked up several sonic emitters from fallen weapons and tucked them into his belt. "Some will call me a traitor and try to kill me," he admitted, "but others will listen. Others will remember their own strange dreams and wonder if freedom might be possible for them too." Thalric appeared from the medical tent where he had been waiting during the battle, too inexperienced to fight, but too determined to leave. "I want to go with you," the young warrior said to Catherall. "I want to help spread the truth." Catherall shook his head. "No. Young one, you should stay with the humans," he said. "Learn their ways, become a bridge between our peoples. Because if this works, someday we will need to build a peace together." Thalric nodded slowly and looked at Harper. "Will you teach me?" He asked. Harper thought about his brother, about the Velthari who had killed him, and about the future that might now be possible. "Yeah," he said finally. "I will teach you." Catherall clasped Harper's hand in the human style. a gesture he had seen but never understood until now. "Thank you," the former war commander said, "for pulling the trigger when I begged you not to. I almost did not." Harper admitted, "But you did," Kethral replied, "because you understood something that my people forgot 10,000 years ago." "What is that?" Kethral smiled, an expression that felt strange on his face, but somehow right, that sometimes saving someone means hurting them first. And that true strength is not in conquering others, but in setting them free. He turned and walked away across the battlefield, gathering other freed Velthari as he went, until a small army of the Awakened followed him toward the horizon. The war was not over. Harper knew it might take generations to free every Velthari from the parasites, and some would fight that freedom until their dying breath, but for the first time in 50 years. There was hope, because on a blood-soaked ridge named Ember, humanity had won a victory not by destroying their enemies, but by saving them, and it had started with one soldier who refused to let his enemy remain a slave, even when that enemy begged him to.